There's an old rule in journalism. One thing happening could be a fluke. Two things may be a coincidence. But three is a trend. So let me tell you about three things that happened in California this year. In January, Rupert Murdoch's company launched a brand new tabloid in Los Angeles, the California Post. This summer, a former Fox News host advanced to the general election for California governor. And then last week, the Murdochs Fox Corporation agreed to spend $22 billion to buy the San Jose-based Roku, the streaming box that's probably sitting under your TV right now. A newspaper, a gubernatorial candidate, and the streaming platform bringing services into 100 million homes, all in California, all in 1 year, and all roads leading back to one 95-year-old Australian? That's not a fluke. That's a trend. So today on PST, why is California getting Murdochified? And why now? Joining me to break all of this down is Brian Stelter, the chief media analyst for CNN and the lead author of the Reliable Sources newsletter. He's also the author of 2 books detailing Rupert Murdoch and his family's empire. So he's the perfect person to help us make sense of Murdoch going west. I'm Emily Dreyfuss, and this is PST. So Brian, thank you so much for joining me on PST today.
Thank you.
Ever since Murdoch launched the California Post earlier this year, I've been dying to talk to you about what it all means. And then when I saw recently that Fox News Corp made this bid to purchase Roku, which is based in the South Bay here, I thought, okay, the Murdochification of California is truly on. Let's talk about it. It really feels to me in some ways like there's a Murdoch invasion happening on the West Coast. I'd like to ask you if you think that's fair, and if so, what kind of playbook does Murdoch usually use when they move into a new market?
Well, invasion has certain connotations, that's for sure.
Yes.
But the Murdochs, who have loved California personally for a long time, who have lived in California for much of their lives, now they want to have more of an impact politically. And that's what we see through the California Post. That's what we see through some of the programming on Fox News. I think the Roku deal is a little bit different, but it's a really important piece of the story as well, because it points to Fox Corp's vision going forward. You know, it's a weird company, Emily. It's a strange family-owned business, one of the biggest, most powerful media companies on the planet, but really just a family business also. Rupert Murdoch, the patriarch, his son Lachlan running these companies, the other children basically out on their own, having left the companies entirely. And it's also weird because you have multiple companies all controlled by the Murdochs. You have the publishing side, Dow Jones, owned by News Corp. That's where the California Post comes from. And then you have Fox Corp, which is where Fox News and Roku comes from. So it's complicated. I will sometimes refer to those as different entities, but they are all part of the same family enterprise. They ultimately all roll up to the Murdochs. So some of the, specific business strategies might be a little different. Some of the maneuvers might be a little different, but it all does add up to the same story. And that's why I was so intrigued when you emailed me about this, because I haven't seen anybody try to put it all together in one place yet.
Well, yeah, and I really do want to pressure test my theory about, these three sort of different things. And we'll talk about Steve Hilton and his connection to Fox News as well, and see if my theory of it all adding up to something makes sense. But before we get too deep in it, let's just remind listeners kind of the deal with the Murdoch empire. So you've mentioned a couple of the aspects of it. They have these 2 different corporations. What is the power of the Murdoch empire right now, and who is running the show?
Right. It's very much Rupert and Lachlan's show. Rupert Murdoch, who built this empire over a period of decades, who was both envied and feared and loved and hated and all the rest. I feel like, he's the person that everyone knows either as a boogeyman or as a hero in the media world. Then comes his son Lachlan, his oldest son, and his younger son James, who for a period of decades battled for control of the family business. There were all of these succession dramas that literally inspired the HBO show Succession. And within the past 5-6 years, it became very clear that Lachlan was going to be the winner of that family drama, that James Murdoch could not stand some of the conservative toxicity that was coming out of Fox News. He was disturbed by some of the climate change denialism coming out of News Corp, out of the New York Post. He had a laundry list of complaints about the editorial content at these outlets, but also about some of the business strategies. He was opposed also to some of the maneuvers or the lack of maneuvers that his father was making. So you have James, the more liberal or at least centrist son, who is exiled or self-exiled. You know, it's complicated. There's whole books about it. He's out. Lachlan, who is the more conservative son, clearly was ascendant and is ascendant. And so who runs the show? The answer is Lachlan runs the show, but dad is still around.
And what is the state of Fox News's hold on the American people right now in terms of market share? Like, how many people are watching Fox?
Fox News, Fox Corporation, News Corporation, let's just take them all as the Murdoch media empire. I could make a strong case to you that its power is waning, that it is less powerful than it was 10 years ago. But I could make an equally, I think, even better case, actually, a stronger case that its power remains really, really significant and in some ways is growing. And the moves that we're talking about here today, like the California Post and Roku, those are really high profile attempts to maintain and expand the company's power. So why might it be on the decline? Well, because Fox News is not growing audience in a big way anymore. It is still must-see TV in the White House. It is still Trump TV. It is still the most popular cable channel in America most nights. So Fox News is still really, really dominant, really, really powerful among its base audience. But it's not as if new viewers are coming into Fox every day saying, oh, I'm now a Fox News fan. Like, that's a challenge for the Murdochs going forward. But here's why I say I can make a stronger counter argument. Who is President Trump whining and dining at the White House? Who does he care a lot about? Who does he want to appeal to? It's Rupert Murdoch. It is still Rupert Murdoch, same as it was 10 years ago during Trump 1.0. These two men have a really twisted, really complicated history. They pull apart, they come back together. It's sorted, and we can get into it if you want. But I think the bottom line is we still see the Trump administration deeply valuing the Murdoch relationship. And I think that tells you a lot about where power is and who has the power. When it comes to the right-wing media, the Murdochs still have the power.
And why would the Murdochs want to expand into California? What does California represent for them?
I'm picturing California the way folks did living in the East, hearing about the gold rush or hearing about all the Wild West, hearing about all the opportunities on the West Coast, hearing about the grandeur of the Pacific. Like, I'm picturing a little bit of that when you ask the question, because California's frontier territory. Yeah. It's an opportunity for conquest. It's an opportunity to convince millions of people who are not already in your camp that you're right and that your politics are right, literally right. You think about what the Fox News narrative is about California, or the Wall Street Journal opinion page narrative about California. It's that these boneheaded liberals just don't know how bad they have it. Don't know how bad it is. Don't know how much better it can be. Need to be helped along to find the truth, to find the right way, to find conservative values. Like, I'm picturing, and I don't think the Murdochs would ever express this in that way, but it's that idea that it's an untapped market. It's an opportunity to influence California politics, to pull California politics more to the middle, and then maybe someday to the right. You live there. Am I getting to the right? Do you think I'm framing that the right way?
I think so. Yeah. I mean, well, that's what I've been wondering, is whether it's just, okay, maybe we're an opportunity for a ripe media market. So maybe like the California Post just sees, okay, there's a market share opportunity here. But then I think, okay, but the Murdochs have always had an ideological bent to their media empire. And so part of me sees this as maybe they're hoping that they can influence the populace to turn California red.
I think it's 1,000% about politics, just as much, or at least almost as much, as about a business opportunity. But let's take the business part first, because there is an interesting business argument for the California Post. You have folks who are at least familiar with the New York Post brand, who know some of the columnists, who certainly know the identity and the attitude of the paper. And then moreover, in California, they can reprint a lot of what's in the New York Post. Like, that's, I think, the business brilliance of this. they are rerunning some of the content. Some days I've noticed the California and New York Post headlines are the same. The front covers, the tabloid covers are the same. Like on a slow news day, they're not bothering to come up with a different cover. No, they're rerunning the news. They're basically making a national paper. So there are some obvious synergies. But then I think the more interesting, more important story is the political effort here. There is a political effort to use the California Post to influence California politics and to bring the Murdochs' point of view into California in a way that it never has before. It's fascinating to me because Rupert is known for his vineyard in Bel Air. Famously, it's where he helped get the Disney deal done, where he wooed Bob Iger over glasses of wine, and they figured out how to sell most of then Fox Corporation over to Disney. And, I always think about that vineyard when I'm on the 405. That speaks to the Murdochs. I don't know if the word is love for California, but appreciation for California, right?
Right.
Just like everybody has that recognition that it's an incredible place to live. And yet, if you watch Fox News, you hear about the apocalypse, right? You hear about California dystopia. You hear all the worst about LA and San Francisco and all the rest. So what I don't know, and what you don't know, what I don't think any of us knows is, to what degree do Rupert and Lachlan believe the Fox News and Journal narrative about California? Like, how much do they actually think it's true versus how much do they know based on their own time in the state that it's not true? And to what degree are they trying to change the politics in California for their own personal financial interests, for their own genuine beliefs about how politics should work? I guess that's the impossible part to know here, but there's definitely something to that.
What do you know about whether or not it's succeeding? It moved in here in January. It's brand new. At first, it was just like a tab on the New York Post's website, but it also has a print edition, although I've never come across that in real life in San Francisco, but it supposedly is for sale around here and is being delivered to people's homes. Do we know if it's working?
There's not the tangible data that I can hold up and say, yes. These things always launch with ridiculously big aspirations. And in this case, in January, the publisher talked about 39 million people in the state. It's the fourth largest economy in the world, talking about trying to reach, that giant audience. In reality, we can look at the traffic for the California Post, and it's still very small. But if the goal is politics and the goal is to give conservative columnists a bigger platform and help them reach an audience, even if that audience is only 1 million people, that's still significant. If the goal is to get Steve Hilton elected, then it's going to be a different yardstick that this is all going to be measured by. And I think the thing about the Murdochs is that they are patient sometimes with these things. They will give it time to grow. They will put the New York Post behind it. I notice now every night I get an email from the Post. I get the cover of the New York tabloid. I also get the cover of the California one. So they're making sure the press gets it. Those are the kinds of things you do to make sure this thing punches above its weight. So even if it's not organically building up an audience, it is still visible and it seems influential.
Yeah. Well, you mentioned, hey, if the goal is to get Steve Hilton elected, then that's a whole different yardstick. So let's talk about him. Yeah. He's this Fox News personality making a power play in our state. He's now the best funded Republican in the governor's race.
Yeah.
Is it fair to see him as a Murdoch project, or is he just a guy who used to be on Fox News and this is not fair?
I think it's definitely fair to describe him as a Murdoch project. I just wouldn't end the sentence that way. I would say he is many things. He's really interesting as a character, but one of the things he is a Murdoch project. I mean, he was bequeathed a Fox News show, this weekend show. I think it was in 2017 where he started hosting this show on Fox News, which always kind of stuck out to me like a little bit of a sore thumb on Fox. Yeah, and I say that as a host on cable news myself at the time. Like I was a weekend host on CNN at the time. I would see Hilton on in the evenings. We're both basically bald. So I was like intrigued. Another bald guy had a show, okay? And he was doing stuff on Fox News you would rarely hear. He was much more interested in policy. He obviously came from the UK. He was talking about politics in the UK and elsewhere. He was coming at it as much more of a populist explicitly at a time when, yes, Trump had taken office, but you didn't think about Fox News in terms of populism necessarily. You thought about figures like Sean Hannity, who were just much more traditionally conservative Republican, who were going through their own Trump metamorphosis, but were just starting to go through that. Hilton, I think in some ways was ahead of his time, but he was also much more interested in politics and technology and other topics. his show seemed to me to be like really specifically a Murdoch project back then. And I did dig around about it a little bit and found out that yes, there was a relationship with Rupert. No, they weren't talking all the time. It wasn't like Murdoch was the producer of the show, but Murdoch had clearly taken a liking to Steve Hilton. He clearly was fond of Steve Hilton. He was invested in Steve Hilton's success. And that is oftentimes why these shows exist on Fox News for as many years as they do. Hilton, I think he was on for 6 years, and then he left to lay the groundwork for what became, this governor's race. But it was definitely telling that he had that weekend time slot. It was not an accident, and it was not because he was the most attractive and brilliant cable news pundit out there who got promoted. It was partly a Murdoch project. Yeah.
I see. And do you expect Murdoch to put, the powers of his empire behind Hilton's race in California?
I would say that he has, and he is, and he will continue to. Partly just in the way that Fox News and the other Fox outlets talk about California. Partly just through the editorial choices that these brands make. Partly that is helping out Hilton, isn't it? Buttressing his candidacy, reinforcing his arguments, trying to get his message across. I noticed a couple of years ago, Fox News added a late night show out of California. There's an hour anchored by Trace Gallagher, who's based in LA. And partly that's because of the time zones. It's kind of more convenient, right, to have a guy on 8, 9 p.m. local time in California for a late night audience on the East Coast. But also, he's focusing sometimes on California stories. He is pushing that narrative of liberal blue cities on the West Coast being out of control. There's no escaping that storyline that Fox and to some extent the other Murdoch brands choose to emphasize.
Absolutely. I mean, as a person who lives in the hellhole of San Francisco, reading the headlines about my own city is often hilarious when I'm like at the beach with my children and I don't even lock my front door in my neighborhood. But the stories are like, there's murderers everywhere and they're going to steal your catalytic converter if you dare to drive. But one question I have that I am curious about is how we Californians are going to handle having that narrative put down our own faces, because I've certainly seen, in some of the group chats I'm in and in just like Reddit threads about San Francisco and the Bay Area, sometimes you'll see these California Post headlines discussed and people are like, are they living in the same universe as us? Like, oh my God. And the joke is like, California, what a dump. But then the picture is like the most beautiful thing you've ever seen. So I wonder how that will play. But
there's a couple elements of that though, right? Because you do have in a state with what is it? It is almost 40 million people, right? So what percentage Republican? You still have millions of Republican voters.
You really do.
Who really don't feel represented by many of the other media outlets in the state. So even if you're reaching a minority, you may be reaching a valuable audience in that case from a business standpoint.
Totally. Well, and also California is hugely rural as well. Yeah. I mean, we're not just cities. And so it might be that people in the cities are rolling their eyes about the supposed, violent headlines. Yeah. But the people in rural communities might be like, well, actually, I am afraid to go into San Francisco. Like there's homeless people everywhere. You know what I mean? And maybe it appeals to them.
Do headlines from the California Post make it harder to talk to each other? Yes. And that I think is the crux of the problem. Like that's the crux of the matter is this kind of coverage, this kind of commentary, it makes it harder for us to communicate as opposed to make it easier.
I want to get to the third leg of the trend stool that I'm talking about here with Murdoch moving into California, and that's Roku. Fox Corp agreed to buy local streaming platform Roku for $22 billion. And, of course, this is going to give them this huge platform. Roku reaches 100 million homes, they say. But the thing about Roku that interests me is that it doesn't operate like a traditional streaming channel. It's not one channel. It's the hub for all the channels. And I have multiple Roku TVs in my home. My question for you is the point of this purchase so that Murdoch can basically get access to that Roku homepage where, things are advertised and they get to make editorial decisions about what I'm seeing? And should I, as a Californian or anyone in America, expect that my Roku homepage is about to be decided by Murdoch and have like a much more right-wing bent to what is being advertised to me?
I think it's definitely a genuine question and concern, but it's one of those impossible to answer questions at the moment because number one, the deal's got to go through. It most likely will. And then number two, it always takes time for a new owner to get their hands around what they've bought and figure out what they're going to do with it. So far, what we've heard from Fox Corp is that they're going to keep their own streaming service Tubi separate from Roku. But you've got to imagine there's going to be some integration over time. And you've got to imagine that over time, yes, the Murdochs are going to want to use Roku as their homepage for all things within their media company, within their empire.
Right.
It's only natural. It's what you would expect. And that is why this deal has raised eyebrows quite a bit, and not just in liberal circles, although there's been some of that. Also from rivals of Fox, just in general, who are concerned about it. But, this Roku asset was in the market for a while. There was curiosity about who, if anybody, would bid. There were reports that Netflix took a look. It does seem savvy by Fox. It's definitely the biggest bet that Lachlan Murdoch has made. Think about what it's like for him. He's, under the shadow of his father, his larger than life father who built this empire, and he needs to show his own way forward. Well, this deal was his biggest step yet at doing that, where he's looking at the entertainment landscape and he's buying kind of like a TV guide, a digital TV guide or a digital homepage. I mean, for me, all the TVs in my house that have Roku, it's where we're going first. It is that starting point. So there is a lot of power that comes from it. But I would point out that the power of Roku will degrade if Fox is too heavy-handed, right? If I can't just easily get to HBO Max because Fox is getting in the way, then I'm probably going to have to buy a different streaming stick. So there's some of that that's going on too.
Well, I mean, I the first thing I did when I read about this was call my mom, who is a bleeding heart liberal who lives in a red state, and her house is filled with Roku TVs. So I broke the news to her because she hadn't heard it yet. And I said, what does this mean to you? Do you feel a certain kind of way about it? And she said, it seems to me like a great reason to buy a new TV.
I don't think she needs to buy a new TV, at least not yet. But I take your point about a red state is interesting. I saw Puck, I think it was Peter Hamby at Puck, who said that Roku is a little bit like the streaming service of flyover country. And I had not thought about it that way because you have a bunch, I have a bunch of these, but I think it is true that it over indexes between the coasts, maybe more so than folks who live in New York or LA who might have different streaming services built into their TV or something. A lot of TVs increasingly, as you're pointing out, also have that Roku software built in. And that's what made it so valuable to Lachlan, right? It's like the infrastructure for streaming television increasingly. And it's like the default increasingly. So it is really valuable. It also points a way forward to what Fox Corp is going to be someday. Because right now it's known mostly as Fox News and Fox Sports. What is it going to become? And can it be big enough to survive really becomes a question. In a world where Paramount is trying to buy my parent company, CNN's parent company, Warner Bros. Discovery, and that deal may take effect soon. In a world where Disney and Netflix and YouTube and TikTok are the giants, Fox has to figure out a way to even justify its existence going forward. Or else it becomes relegated to kind of this really lower tier of more niche, smaller players in media. So for Lachlan Murdoch, big bet to try to stay big and to stay relevant. So from a business standpoint, really interesting for him. Politically, I don't think we can say what it means, if anything, yet.
It's interesting. So you're saying that in some ways the Roku deal is about buying like the infrastructure of how people even get their content. And it's a little bit of a step away from content as the point to instead being about like delivering other content to everyone.
Right. I think that's right. He's thinking about the platform as much as the programming. But you have to think about both if you're a media mogul or a wannabe media mogul these days. For Paramount and WBD, it's about bringing Paramount Plus and HBO Max together and trying to make sure that platform is big enough to be worthy in a world of Netflix and YouTube. So if you're Lachlan Murdoch, you have to think about how to be a platform as well. And by the way, the contrast to his brother is really interesting here. So we're talking about California, but what did Lachlan's brother James just buy? He just bought
New York Magazine.
Right. And he just bought Vox's podcasts. So you have the other brother, the exiled Murdoch brother, who, by the way, obviously has property in California, I'm sure loves the state also, but he is venturing out on his own, buying content, trying to start to build out his own media company. And if you think that one brother does something without the other brother noticing, or if you don't think they're competing, then, you're crazy. They're definitely thinking about each other and trying to build for the future, both of them.
There's a lot of pressures on the industry, on the media industry, on the news industry that are coming from California themselves. I mean, you mentioned YouTube, you mentioned Netflix. These are Northern California disruptive companies that have eaten the lunch of all of the old guys and the old guard, and now they are ascendant. And this feels like, well, Roku is right next door to them. It is also kind of the nuts and bolts of the streaming new world order. And it seems like it's Lachlan saying, okay, I'm going to make my bet that this is here to stay. And in a way, I also see it as affirming that Northern California has become a real power center when it comes to the future of media, in a way that, Hollywood has been feeling like it's struggling, and Southern California used to be where cultural power was based, but it feels like the tables have turned a bit.
That's such a great point.
And this is further confirmation.
Yes, it definitely is. YouTube and Netflix, the others that you named, coming out of Silicon Valley and just slowly but steadily taking over the rest of the industry, and really forcing everybody else to play on their terms. Like, that is the story of the last 10 years. That now everybody else wants to be Netflix and everyone else has to be on YouTube in order to reach people around the world. Right. Your point about North versus South is really interesting, because every time I'm in LA, I notice some new Netflix building or some new Netflix area. They've just bought one of the old studios down in Culver City, or right near Culver City. Of course, they've got that giant tower in Hollywood, but they have also made their mark in LA in a way that's been very disruptive.
Yes.
But that's a company that, of course, came out of Silicon Valley and has now swallowed up Hollywood. And, we haven't even we haven't even mentioned Apple and the other tech players,
right?
Amazon, that want to be in this. And, what's in the news lately about this? It's Amazon funding a movie about the OpenAI CEO and then shelving the movie because it got cold feet.
I know.
The stories about power, that a generation ago, it was always about the Murdochs and what they were trying to do with their editorial pages. Now that's still true, but it's also a story about what's being platformed and what's not by these tech giants.
We've been talking this whole time, Ryan, about sort of, East Coast media coming west and Murdoch seeing an opportunity here in the West. But I've also been noticing the reverse a bit. I'm thinking about TMZ moving into Washington, D.C. and taking their kind of California gossip approach to news to the DC media ecosystem. Have you also noticed that, number one? And does it seem a little bit like maybe the coasts are sort of flirting with each other? Like, I'd like a little bit of what you've got. I want a little bit of what you've got.
I can't say it any better than that, but yes, definitely. And that speaks to this idea that startups, even though TMZ has been around for a long time, it very much has a startup mentality.
Right.
It very much thinks about the attention war and how it's going to extract a little more of your attention today. Media companies that operate in that way and are thinking on those terms, they're definitely going to go from west to east or east to west or in both directions. And they definitely know that there's an audience that does think about itself as flying over the rest of the country and does think of itself as being East West Coast at the same time, right?
Right.
There are those people who read the New York Post and would read the California Post. They might not know about it yet, but there are those folks who split their time. There are those folks who think of themselves as being fluent on both coasts. There's audience opportunity there for sure.
Do you think the Murdochs are going to be successful in California?
I'm afraid to make a prediction that I'll regret a year or two or three or four from now, okay? Because what does success mean? Is I think we've established success can mean many different things to the Murdochs in California. Yeah. But it is apparent to me that political influence is really what they're pursuing. And, that really comes down to demographic change and voter behaviors in California. How many people are persuadable by what the Murdochs and their outlets are saying? How many people are buying what they're selling, so to speak?
What are you looking at? Like Brian Stelter, media critic, what are you looking at in California to see how California reacts to Murdoch's empire being here and how Murdoch reacts to being in California?
I want to see how big the California Post can get, how that can be measured. If it has political wins that it says it puts on the board, right? They endorsed Steve Hilton. Now we're going to go forward with the governor's race. Will they be able to point to victories, tangible victories that they've achieved, political or otherwise, in the state? What's Fox News going to be saying on midterm election night and in the days after this November? What's it going to be saying about California? I think a lot of people are concerned about what President Trump and his allies might say about vote rigging. We've already seen a lot of that this spring. What's the narrative going to be from the Murdoch outlets this fall, this winter? So, those are some of the questions. And I always think, broadly speaking, I've always thought, and I know many others think about California as being a preview of the future, right? A representation of the future, showing us where we're going, showing the rest of the country where it's going. So it's no wonder the Murdochs want to be a part of that. It's no wonder they want to be more influential in California, of all places.
Brian, thank you so much for this insightful conversation. I really appreciate it.
Thank you.
So what do you think about all this? Are you concerned about Murdoch going west? Relieved? Happy? Have you seen a physical copy of the California Post in real life? I'd love to know. Send us an email at pst@sfstandard.com. And next week, stick around and hear me answer the question, when will I be able to buy a sex robot for my mother?
You know what? I'd like to kiss a beautiful, handsome robot. I'd like to hang out with a robot. I would like him to fix things, and maybe he could help me put Christmas lights up and climb ladders and do things. And yeah, he could even sleep in my bed, okay?
I bet you didn't see that one coming, right? This episode was produced by Eddie Sun and Jorge Olivares. It was edited by Sophie Behrman. Our engineer is Michelle Lands. Video by Morgan Ellis. Music by Veritak and Carly Vaughn. You can support this podcast by becoming a subscriber of the SF Standard by going to sfstandard.com/subscriber. And you can reach us by emailing pst@sfstandard.com. I'm your host, Emily Dreyfuss. Thanks for listening to PST.